I had everything I thought I wanted. A beautiful wife of 7 years, Natalie, who I believed loved me as much as I loved her. A construction business I built from scratch into a multi-million-dollar company. Even my relationship with my brother Jackson seemed to be improving. But something felt off when Natalie started acting strange around him. That gut feeling grew stronger when I saw a message pop up on her phone one night. "Meet me at our spot, Jackson." Before I tell you how my entire life crashed down when I caught them together, let me know where you are watching from and hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you will want to stick around for how I rebuilt everything they tried to destroy. Growing up, our family dynamic was always complicated. My father, Frank, now 62, ran our household like a business after my mother passed away when I was just 8 years old. My older brother Jackson, 38, was always the golden child in my father's eyes, while I, Colton, 35, constantly had to prove my worth. That void left by my mother created a competitive tension between Jackson and me that my father never addressed, instead often fueling it by comparing us. Despite the family drama, I found happiness when I met Natalie in college. She was studying business administration while I was focusing on architecture and construction management. We connected instantly, and she became my first and only real love. Her warm smile and ambitious nature complemented my determined personality perfectly. After 3 years of dating, I proposed and we had a beautiful wedding 7 years ago, even though my father thought I was rushing into marriage. "You are too young to settle down," he told me the night before my wedding. "You should be focusing on your career, not playing house." I ignored his criticism as I often did, and married Natalie anyway. With her support, I started Green Summit Construction from our garage, taking small renovation jobs at first. Through hard work, quality craftsmanship, and smart networking, I grew the company steadily. By our 5th wedding anniversary, I had secured major contracts for commercial buildings and residential developments, employing 50 people and generating millions in revenue annually. Jackson, meanwhile, struggled to find his path. He got his girlfriend Ashley pregnant 6 years ago but never proposed to her. They had a son, Lucas, who Jackson claimed to love but often neglected in favor of partying and networking, as he called it. His employment history was spotty, at best jumping from sales jobs to marketing positions without ever developing real expertise. When Jackson lost his 3rd job in 2 years, I offered him a position at Green Summit as a project coordinator. It was a role I created specifically for him, hoping to give him some stability for his son's sake. "Thanks, little brother," he said with that smile that never quite reached his eyes. "I will make you proud." For a while, things seemed okay. Jackson showed up to work on time. Natalie and I were planning to start our own family, and the business was thriving. But about 8 months ago, I started noticing changes in Natalie. She began dressing differently, wearing more makeup and checking her phone constantly. When I would come home from work sometimes, she would be hours late with vague explanations about girls' night or working late. Her usual affection toward me cooled, and our intimate life became nearly non-existent. At the same time, Jackson suddenly became intensely interested in the business, asking questions about contracts, clients, and finances that he had never cared about before. During meetings, I caught him taking notes on things that had nothing to do with his role. When confronted, he would laugh it off, just trying to understand the big picture. "Little brother, you always said I should take more initiative." The strangest part was how Natalie began defending Jackson whenever I expressed frustration about his performance, before she would roll her eyes at his antics. Now she was his biggest advocate. "You need to give him a chance, Colton. He is really trying this time," she would say, her voice taking on an unusual edge. The first real moment of suspicion came during a family dinner at our house. Jackson brought Ashley and 5-year-old Lucas over supposedly to celebrate Ashley's new job. Throughout the evening, I noticed strange glances between Jackson and Natalie. They seemed to have inside jokes I was not part of, and their hands brushed too many times when passing dishes to be accidental. Natalie complained of a headache halfway through dinner and went upstairs, leaving me to entertain our guests. Ashley looked uncomfortable the entire time, barely making eye contact with Jackson or Natalie. When they left, I went to check on Natalie and found her texting rapidly on our bed. She quickly turned the phone screen down when I walked in. "Feeling better?" I asked. "Not really," she replied, her voice lacking any real pain. I just need some sleep. Later that night, when she was in the shower, I did something I had never done before. I checked her phone. A text from an unsaved number caught my attention. Tonight was torture. I hate seeing you with him. My stomach dropped, but I told myself I was overreacting. Maybe it was a friend going through a breakup. Maybe I was just paranoid. I needed more evidence before jumping to conclusions. But I could not shake the feeling that something was very wrong in my marriage, and possibly my company too. Over the next few weeks, I began paying closer attention to Natalie's behavior. She was receiving calls at odd hours that she would take in another room. Her location sharing on our phones mysteriously stopped working. When I asked about her day, her stories had inconsistencies I had never noticed before. One Tuesday, she told me she was working late on a project, but when I called her office around 9 p.m., her coworker said she had left at 5. When confronted, Natalie claimed she was at a coffee shop working independently. The lie was so transparent, it physically hurt. After 3 sleepless nights debating with myself, I did something I am not proud of. I hired a private investigator, a retired police officer named Thomas, who specialized in infidelity cases. He took the job reluctantly after seeing how distraught I was. In 20 years of doing this, I have never seen a happy ending from what I find, he warned me. Are you sure you want to know? I nodded. I needed the truth, regardless of how painful it might be. A week later, Thomas called me to meet at a diner across town. He slid a manila envelope across the table without speaking. Inside were photos of Natalie entering and leaving a hotel downtown. In several images, Jackson was with her, his arm around her waist, kissing her in the parking garage. My world collapsed around me. The evidence was undeniable. The betrayal complete. My brother and my wife. The 2 people I trusted most. That night, Natalie came home looking unusually happy. Over dinner, she announced that she was pregnant. 6 weeks along, she said. My mind raced, calculating the timing, remembering that we had not been intimate in nearly 3 months. The baby, I said quietly. Is it mine? Her silence was my answer. She burst into tears, not from guilt, but from being caught. I did not mean for this to happen, she finally said. Jackson and I, we just connected. He understands me in ways you never could. The next day, I confronted Jackson at work, calling him into my office and locking the door. Are you sleeping with my wife? I asked directly, my voice eerily calm. Jackson leaned back in the chair, his posture relaxed as if we were discussing the weather. What did she tell you? She told me enough. She is pregnant. Says, it is yours. He did not deny it. Instead, he had the audacity to smirk. Some things just happen, little brother. Chemistry cannot be controlled. I wanted to hit him, to hurt him physically as much as he had hurt me emotionally, but I would not give him that satisfaction. You are fired, I said. Pack your things and get out of my company. Jackson stood up slowly. We will see about that. You might want to talk to Dad first. Confused and angry, I called my father that evening and asked him to meet me. I told him everything over dinner at his house, expecting outraged support, anything other than what I got. Colton, my father said slowly, you need to think about this from a family perspective. Jackson is having another child. He needs stability now. He slept with my wife. He betrayed me in the worst possible way. These things happen. Dad shrugged. Men stray. Women stray. You can divorce Natalie, but Jackson is still your brother. And what about my company? I fired him today. My father's expression darkened. About that. You cannot fire him. I have been talking with Jackson about the future of Green Summit. He has some excellent ideas for expansion. Before I could process what was happening, Ashley called me in tears. She had discovered texts between Jackson and Natalie months ago, but had been too afraid to tell me. Jackson had threatened to take Lucas away if she said anything. She told me Jackson had been planning this for over a year, systematically working to take over my company and my life. The betrayal spread beyond my marriage. My own brother had been plotting against me while sleeping with my wife. And somehow my father was involved too. The impact on Green Summit was immediate. I could barely focus on projects. Employees sensed the tension, especially when Jackson showed up the next day despite being fired. He started spreading rumors that I was having a breakdown, that I was no longer fit to lead. We lost a major contract when I failed to meet a deadline too. Consumed by personal chaos to notice it approaching, clients began calling Jackson directly instead of me. The final breaking point came when I returned home early from a failed client meeting to find Jackson's car in my driveway. I walked in to find him and Natalie on our couch, looking at baby name books. "What the hell is this?" I demanded. "We need to talk," Natalie said calmly. "This situation is not working for anyone." Jackson stood up. "I have been talking with Dad. We think it would be best if you took some time away from the company. For your mental health." "My mental health?" I laughed bitterly. "You sleep with my wife, get her pregnant, try to steal my company, and you are concerned about my mental health." "See." Jackson looked at Natalie. "He is becoming unstable." In that moment, I knew I had lost everything. My marriage, my brother, my father's respect, and now potentially my company. The life I had carefully built was crumbling beneath my feet. A week later, my father called an emergency family meeting at his house. Everyone was there: my father, Jackson, Natalie, even Ashley with little Lucas. I sat alone on one side of the living room, while the others clustered together. "I have been thinking about the future of our family and the business my father began. In light of recent events, I believe a change in leadership is necessary at Green Summit Construction." I felt physically ill as he continued. "Jackson will be taking over as CEO effective immediately. The company needs stability, especially with him becoming a father again." "That is my company," I protested. "I built it from nothing while Jackson was hopping between jobs." My father slid some papers across the coffee table. "Actually, when you formed the LLC 5 years ago, you gave me 30% ownership as thanks for my initial investment. I have been in discussions with Jackson, and I am transferring my shares to him." I grabbed the papers, scanning them in disbelief. Not only had my father transferred his shares, but there were documents showing he had been secretly buying additional shares from minor investors I had brought on. Between him and Jackson, they now controlled 51% of my company. "This is illegal," I said. "It is perfectly legal," my father countered. "Check with your lawyer if you do not believe me." Natalie, sitting beside Jackson with her hand protectively over her still flat stomach, finally spoke. "Colton, this is for the best. You were always too cautious with the business. Jackson has vision. He wants to expand into commercial real estate development. You never had that kind of ambition." The betrayal was complete. My wife, carrying my brother's child, was lecturing me about ambition while they stole the company I had built through years of sacrifice and hard work. I walked out without another word, got in my car, and drove aimlessly for hours. That night, I stayed at a hotel, unable to return to the house I shared with Natalie. The next morning, I called my friend Kyle, who offered his guest room, until I could find a new place. For a month, I barely functioned. Depression consumed me. I drank too much, slept too little, and ignored calls from everyone. The only person I spoke to was Diana, the cutthroat divorce attorney Kyle recommended. "They cannot just take your company," Diana insisted during our first meeting. "And we will make sure Natalie does not get a penny more than she deserves," which is nothing after what she did. Her confidence gave me the first spark of hope I had felt since everything fell apart. Slowly, I began to form a plan. If Jackson and my father wanted Green Summit so badly, they could have it, but I would make sure they understood what they were taking on. First, I officially moved out, taking only my personal belongings. I filed for divorce, citing adultery, and naming Jackson specifically in the petition, ensuring it would become public record. I found a small apartment downtown and began rebuilding my life one piece at a time. Instead of fighting to regain control of Green Summit, I decided to let Jackson and my father deal with the complexities they knew nothing about. I stopped answering questions about ongoing projects, client relationships, or vendor contracts. "You wanted the company," I told Jackson, when he called demanding information about a major client's specifications. "Figure it out yourself." Meanwhile, I contacted the most valuable clients, privately explaining the situation honestly. Most expressed sympathy and promised to consider working with me again in the future. I had saved a substantial amount of money that Natalie knew nothing about, a habit from growing up with financial insecurity. With that capital, I began planning a new construction company focusing on sustainable building practices, something I had always been passionate about, but Jackson had dismissed as tree-hugger nonsense. I reached out to my most talented employees, those who had been loyal to me personally rather than just the company. Many were already unhappy under Jackson's leadership and agreed to join my new venture when the time was right. After 6 months of careful planning, I launched Phoenix Builders with the tagline, "Rising from the Ashes." Our first project was a small but high-profile, eco-friendly office building that received local press coverage. The publicity caught the attention of investors interested in green construction, bringing in much-needed capital. While Phoenix Builders grew steadily, Green Summit floundered under Jackson's leadership. His grandiose plans for expansion required loans the company could not sustain. He alienated long-term clients with his arrogant approach and lack of construction knowledge. My father, realizing too late what he had done, began pouring his own money into the failing business. Natalie, now visibly pregnant, called me in tears one night. "Jackson is never home. He is always at the office trying to fix some crisis. We cannot even afford the mortgage payment this month." "That sounds like a you problem," I replied before hanging up. 2 months later, Ashley approached me after finding my office address. She looked exhausted with dark circles under her eyes. "Jackson stopped paying child support," she explained. "He says the company is struggling and he cannot afford it. I had to take a second job just to make rent." Unlike with Natalie and Jackson, I felt genuine sympathy for Ashley, and especially for Lucas. None of this was their fault. "Phoenix is hiring an office manager," I told her. "The hours are flexible, and the pay is competitive. If you are interested, I can set up an interview." Ashley burst into tears. "Why would you help me after everything? Lucas deserves better," I said simply. "And you were a victim in this too." As Phoenix Builders celebrated its first anniversary, I had nearly 40 employees, a growing portfolio of successful projects, and a reputation for quality and innovation. More importantly, I had found a sense of purpose again. During this time, I met Lauren, an environmental architect who consulted on one of our projects. Her passion for sustainable design matched my own, and we began dating cautiously. She knew my history and understood my hesitation to trust again. With her support, I started therapy to address the trauma of betrayal and learned to open myself to new relationships. Meanwhile, Green Summit Construction was on the verge of bankruptcy. Jackson had lost their biggest contracts, taken out loans they could not repay, and alienated industry partners I had spent years cultivating. My father had been forced to sell his house to cover debts Jackson had accumulated in the company's name. 2 years after the initial betrayal, I received 3 phone calls in the same week. The first was from Jackson, his voice desperate as he begged for financial help. "The company is going under," he admitted. "Dad and I cannot stop it. We need an investor, and no one will touch us. Please, Colton, for the sake of my children." "Children," I repeated. "How is your son with Natalie?" There was a long pause. "She lost the baby 6 months ago. The stress of everything. She blames me." I felt no satisfaction at his pain, just a dull acknowledgement of life's cruel ironies. "I am sorry for your loss," I said sincerely, "but I cannot help you with the business. You made your choices." The second call was from Diana, my divorce attorney. "Natalie is contesting the settlement again. She is claiming she deserves alimony despite the infidelity because she is unemployed and cannot find work." "Keep fighting it," I instructed. "She made her bed with Jackson. Let them figure it out together." The third call shocked me most. My father, whose health had deteriorated rapidly under the strain of the failing business, was in the hospital after a minor heart attack. Despite everything, I went to see him. He looked small in the hospital bed, his once commanding presence diminished by illness and failure. When he saw me, tears filled his eyes, something I had never witnessed before. "I was wrong," he said simply. "About everything. About Jackson. About you. I chose the wrong son to believe in." I sat beside his bed, conflicted about how to respond. It was never about choosing between us. You could have supported us both in different ways. I know that now, he said. Too late as usual. We talked for hours that day, more honestly than we ever had before. He explained how his own father had pitted him against his brothers, creating a cycle of toxic competition he unknowingly perpetuated. He apologized for dismissing my achievements and enabling Jackson's worst tendencies. I did not forgive him completely that day, but I took the first step. We cannot change the past, I told him before leaving, but we do not have to repeat it. Ashley thrived as Phoenix Builders' office manager, eventually taking on additional responsibilities in client relations. Lucas spent time at the office after school, showing an early interest in architecture that I encouraged. They became a kind of family to me, healing some of the wounds left by Jackson's betrayal. 6 months after my hospital visit with my father, Jackson requested to meet at a neutral location, a coffee shop downtown. He looked haggard, with premature lines around his eyes and a defeated posture. Green Summit is officially bankrupt, he announced, without preamble. Everything is gone. I nodded, having already heard this from industry contacts. What are you going to do now? That depends on you, he said, his eyes fixed on his coffee cup. I know I do not deserve anything from you. What I did was unforgivable, but I am begging really, for a chance to make amends. Where is Natalie? I asked. She left. Said she never should have chosen me over you. Moved back with her parents in Ohio. I considered his request carefully. The old me would have wanted revenge to see him suffer more. But that desire had faded, replaced by something like pity, mixed with the lingering remains of brotherly connection. Phoenix Builders needs someone to manage supply logistics, I said finally. Entry-level position. Regular hours. You would report to Ashley, who runs operations now. His eyes widened in surprise, then understanding. Working under my ex. Fitting punishment. It is not punishment. It is accountability. Take it or leave it. He took it, and though our relationship would never fully heal, we slowly rebuilt a kind of cautious respect. My father passed away 3 months later, leaving behind a letter apologizing once more and expressing pride in what I had accomplished with Phoenix Builders. Lauren and I moved in together, and eventually I proposed. On the day she told me she was pregnant, I felt no fear, only joy and anticipation. The past had lost its power over me. Phoenix Builders continued to grow, becoming a leader in sustainable construction across 3 states. The company I built from nothing after losing everything became more successful than Green Summit ever was. Sometimes the family you choose brings more healing than the family you were born into. What matters is not who hurts you, but how you rise from those ashes. For me, success was not just rebuilding my business, but rebuilding myself into someone stronger and wiser than before. Have you ever had to rebuild something important in your life after betrayal? Share your story in the comments below. If this journey of resilience resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories of overcoming life's greatest challenges. And if you know someone who is struggling to rise from their own ashes, share this with them as a reminder that our greatest setbacks can lead to our greatest comebacks. Thank you for listening, and remember, it is never too late to build something beautiful from the ruins.